Good morning, Delaware. Oh, my gosh. We are back in the studio.
Yes,
it's live again. Hello, Delaware. It's a beautiful day.
Yes.
You can't beat this. It's wonderful to be. And we got one of our favorite guests, Kellen Freeman.
Yes.
So how you doing, Nicole?
I am doing fantastic. This is one of my favorite places to be. And I'm just so glad to be here, Gage.
I know. It's good to see your guys' faces again.
Thank you, WDLR.
It's so nice to see us in three dimensions.
I know, yeah. We got glass shields.
Yeah. So anyway, it's great to be here. We got Greg Tellis on the board. Thank you, Greg, for bringing us back, or Gage, rather, for bringing us back. I actually wrote Gage. I don't know why I'm saying Greg. Oh, well. Anyway,
He's
Gage.
more important, I guess.
Your older, wiser brother.
So anyway, yes, we're back live in the studio, and we are delighted to be here. Let's see, what do we do next? Oh yes, I introduce Kellen, who is our guest today. Kellen Freeman, who manages our Maker Annex, which is now back in the Delaware Library, moved over from Willis, and we're going to be talking about what you're going to be doing with the new location, and that you're back to fabricating things again. Mm-hmm. And so, Nicole, you were talking about a very interesting book before we came in.
Yeah, well, I was. If you could hear my dialogue before we got in, I was debating whether or not I should talk about it, because this isn't going to be a book that's going to make a lot of people happy. And the reason is because the man who's writing this book, it's a biography. The man who's writing this book describes himself as not fitting into any particular cultural norm, any particular cultural group. And the two groups that he's waffling between are groups that have very fixed ideas and have very strong opinions. And so that's why I wasn't necessarily sure I wanted to talk about it. So the book is called, with their little tease, is called Single, Gay, Christian. And it's written by Gregory Coles. The book that I downloaded is from Hoopla, and it is read by, I just lost the name of who it's read by, but it is read by a person with a very nice voice. It's not read by the author. And it's only about a 4.5-hour book. It was published in 2018. And I am Christian, and I'm always trying to find books that intersect the LGBT community and the Christian community, because I like to read about the different experiences. And I think this is one of the really great things about this title and about just books that the library has in general, is that if you can't find something that resonates with you, one, you could write it yourself, which is actually what this author says that he did. He said, I was looking and looking and looking to find a book that resonated with me, that spoke my story, and it didn't exist. And we heard the same thing from Jason Reynolds, actually. Right. When Jason came to speak with us, he said, as a young black man, I was looking and looking and looking for books that spoke my story, and they didn't exist. So I wrote them. And so this story is about this man, Gregory Coles, who grew up very loyal, very in love, very passionate about the church, about his faith. He was raised in a missionary's family, and but then he also was very 100% sure that he was not heterosexual. He describes it as the fact that if you were told that your very best friend, who you've known your entire life, who you have no romantic feelings toward whatsoever, was the person who you were expected to marry, how does that feel? And that's how he describes it. He tried, he couldn't put himself there. He prayed. When he prayed to say, "Can you please make me straight?" The prayers were coming back unanswered. Coming back with no. And so he basically put himself, he tried to date, he did, and it just felt, he kind of describes it as nauseating. So he tried to date women. I'm sorry to not make that clear. He tried to date women, and he just described it as nauseating. So no offense to womankind. And so then he went on a path toward accepting his homosexuality, accepting his Christianity, and also accepting his life as a single man. And so that's where the book takes you. So it's, you know what? You might not agree with any of the things that I've just said, and that's okay. That's what library books are all about. You can take it and leave it. The cool thing is that Gregory gives a little description at the beginning that says, you're going to have strong feelings on one side or the other. And all I ask is that if you have opened this book, listen to my whole story, and then be done with it.
Very interesting.
So it's interesting. I downloaded it from Hoopla, and like I said, it's Hoopla. It's called Single Gay Christian, and it's written by Gregory Coles, published in 2018.
Great. Thank you. That sounds really interesting. Kellen, you reading anything interesting you want to share with us?
I'm going through two things right now. The first is also probably something that most people may not find interesting. It's about board game design, and it's called You Said This Would Be Fun, which is a fantastic title. But it goes through all the process of considerations and things to look for when planning board games. I've been getting back into that this year after taking a few years off, and it's been really helpful in kind of reorienting my mind on how to approach design. The other thing is I've been listening to the Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin. It's a fantastic sci-fi fantasy story. It's a trilogy of books. It was the first time that one person has won the Hugo Award 3 times for each book.
Wow.
So each year she won the book or the award for each book in the series.
Wow.
That's incredible.
It's really good. It takes place in Earth far in the future, where presumably it's hinted that like somebody in our era created these things that then broke the Earth and created seasons. And instead of the normal seasons we have, seasons, especially the 5th season, which is the title of the first book, can extend for centuries. And it just will wipe out life, and it's all about preparing for a season and being ready for that. And, time is broken down according to these seasons and everything. And so certain people are capable of pulling energy from the earth and using it kind of in a magic sense. But they are most often despised by everybody else and are often put out to pasture at the start of a season because they're considered to have failed in their duty of protecting against it.
I see.
And so the main character is one of these, and their struggle against their expectations, their set upon them, and their own expectations, and on the oncoming facing of a season. Cool.
So who's the author again?
N.K. Jemisin.
N.K. Jemisin. And the first one you said was?
The first book in the series is called The 5th Season.
Okay.
And we have all of these at the library, and we also have them on Overdrive as well.
Great.
Nice.
Excellent. So the book I read this week is called Stony the Road, Reconstruction, White Supremacy, and the Rise of Jim Crow, and it was written by Henry Louis Gates. It was published.
Fantastic.
Yeah, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's one of my heroes. I really love Henry Louis Gates. This was published by Penguin last year, 2019. Gates is the Alphonse Fletcher University professor and director of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard University. He must have a business card that's like a block and a half long.
Right.
He's a historian. He's a literary critic. He's a filmmaker. He's referred to as a public intellectual, somebody who can talk about important things in a way people can understand them. I love him as the host of Finding Your Roots on TBS,
That's right.
the genealogy series. It combines historical, genealogical, and genetic research to trace the lineage of various notable people. And they are usually really surprised when they find things out about their backgrounds. And he does a wide variety of peoples. It's not just African Americans. It's not just European. It's been a really interesting mix of people that he's done over the years. He also won the 2013 Peabody Award for his 6-part documentary called The African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. About every other year, he does a documentary of one kind or another for PBS. And this book, Stony the Road, came out of one he was just doing last year called Reconstruction, America After the Civil War. And I got interested in this for a couple of reasons. A friend of mine referred me to a woman named Heather Cox Richardson, who is a historian, and I believe she's at Columbia. I may be wrong about that. But she was doing a series of 1-hour lectures during the pandemic because she couldn't teach in class and she just felt like she really wanted to do something. And so she was doing this long history of Reconstruction and the Jim Crow era and everything, and how all of these things combined with things like that you'd never combine them with, like the cowboy era and the Transcontinental Railroad and the land-grant universities, and how all these things played together. But I got interested in Reconstruction again. And so This book came out, like I said, last year, and I picked it up, and then it sat on my nightstand for a long time, and I finally got into it. And so there's basically only 4 chapters. The first one focuses on the white backlash to Reconstruction, which is the period he calls the Redemption, when white Southerners took back the South after basically after our own Rutherford B. Hayes was made president, and the deal was we'd pull the troops out, or at least we'd have the troops stand down. They still stayed in the South, which is why we still have all these Army bases in the South. But they'd go back to their bases, and they would not get involved in local politics. And in return, the Republicans were allowed to put Hayes in office. That was the deal.
Okay.
So, and it was a period marked by terrorism and violence and legislation that shattered the dreams of a just post-war society. The second chapter covers the old Negro, and that's in quotes, that covers the ways in which pseudoscience helped create this notion that free blacks were totally unable to take care of themselves. They couldn't participate in civic life. They were basically just children or not quite fully developed humans, and so white people really had to take over. And the third chapter is how they did that in terms of framing blackness, which looks at minstrelsy and advertising and movies like The Birth of a Nation that help leverage those images and create both an image for white Americans and some self-image ideas for black Americans that created this kind of a sense of almost like childlike approach. And then finally, the fourth chapter is about what's, again, in quotes, the new Negro, which was the generation that was generally born after enslavement that created a new aesthetic in movements like the Harlem Renaissance, but ultimately couldn't topple the white supremacy culture. So the book is extensively illustrated with photos and cartoons and advertising materials and even like racist circulars that are stunning in their hatred and their cruelty. And it's not all from the 19th century. Some of these images are as recent as the 1970s. And he points to people like Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben who are still on the boxes of the products that we buy in the supermarket. And I have to warn you, some of these images, especially some of the images of lynching, can be real triggers. They're really shocking. Gates shows how the unfulfilled promise of Reconstruction still affects our world today. I started reading this book before the George Floyd murder, but finishing it this week put it into a much different perspective, because a lot of the things that have been complained about and protested about and fought over, there's nothing new about it. And it's like we'll have these moments of moral clarity, and then it just goes right back to where it was. So I'm not sure what's going to happen now. Nobody is. If anybody tells you they're sure what's going to happen, they're either lying or delusional. But one of the great things about Gates is, despite the fact that he's got these academic bona fides going down your arm, he still writes remarkably readable prose. And he's funny, and he's caustic, and he's insightful, and it's a delight to read it. Again, it's called Stony the Road, Reconstruction, White Supremacy, and the Rise of Jim Crow by Henry Louis Gates, Jr. I highly recommend it. So we're going to take a break here. We'll be back in a few moments, and so stay tuned.